Quo Primum by Pope Pius V. And just want to do some brief comments here because, again, we're up against the clock when it comes to our time here because we have another show coming up. But I thought it was worth addressing. I saw a post the other day by somebody. And by the way, somebody's saying we have an echo. Let me check on my audio. I don't know why. I got everything else muted here. Mic 2 is muted, and I got the right microphone selected. So not sure what's going on with the echo. So sorry about that. Anyways, let's move forward because we don't have a whole lot of time. Like I said, we're talking about Quo Primum here, and I saw a post the other day by somebody who will go unmentioned, and because it's not about the individuals, really, it's more about the issues, and that's what I really want to stick to. Somebody posted the other day that this is a problem. Quo Primum has this language in there that really sounds definitive on the Roman Missal, and it really just seems like no changes could be made, even by a pope. Now, this is according to some. I'm not taking that position. I'm just saying some take that view and will say that Quo Primum, has this kind of strong language. And so it poses a problem for the new Roman Missal, right? The one promulgated by Paul VI. So I want to address that. But before I do, I'm going to be as kind as possible here. But honestly, the responses that I see sometimes are they're sad. People who have never looked into the issue of Quo Primum before, with just sharp criticisms towards Catholicism, saying this is a defeater for Catholicism, and people have no business commenting on the matter because they've never studied it. This is what happens when people who are not trained, whether formally or informally, not saying it has to be anything in particular, but just trained in theology and in the subject matter, when they get a hold of some magisterial text, this is what happens. You get all kinds of wild-eyed theories and views, and people who think that this is a defeater for Catholicism. And it just, again, goes to show you how easily scripture, tradition, and the magisterium is mishandled by people today. There's some pros and cons here, right? Now that we have access to the internet, we have access to just all kinds of materials really quickly at the tip of our fingers, but it's a double-edged sword. Even though we have access to a lot of material, we have a lot of opportunity for misunderstanding. So where I'm going with this is, I think it would be best, if you haven't studied a particular area, just reserve judgment. Just say, you know what, I don't know for sure. I have not looked into this. I don't know all the details yet. It seems intriguing, but let me look into this first. I think that would be a better approach than to just look at something like Quo Primum and think, oh man, this is just a defeater for Catholicism. How many times have we dealt with Quo Primum as Catholics? How many times have we dealt with these basic preschool objections? It's not like this is the complicated stuff. No, this isn't the complicated stuff. This is just the average Sunday school teaching. Yeah, there's answers out there, y'all, and I'm gonna give you a few. If you've been concerned about Quo Primum, I get it. I remember the first time I read Quo Primum. I remember thinking, gee, that does seem pretty definitive. What's going on here? How do we reconcile this with Paul VI? Those are legitimate questions. That's perfectly fine to ask, how do we reconcile this? Because it does seem a particular way. Yeah, it's perfectly fine to ask that question. Just remember, keep an open mind. If you haven't looked into this, don't come to any conclusions yet. Well, so much can be said about Quo Primum, but it kind of harkens back to the controversy with the spiritual Franciscans. I mean, it's not directly related, don't get me wrong, but it harkens back to that controversy with John the 22nd, who, he felt like, okay, if you're saying that I am bound to this position that a previous pope declared on matters of discipline, that's a threat to papal supremacy. And he was right. Now, can a pope bind future popes on matters of faith and morals? Yeah, of course. No pope can reverse something that's ex cathedra on faith and morals. But the question arose, can he do so on matters of discipline? And John the 22nd saw that as a threat to papal supremacy, rightly so. So the answer is no. No, a pope cannot bind another pope to a matter of discipline, because you have the problem of equals. They're equal in authority. You can't bind them. And you ask, well, okay, well, how is he bound to matters of faith and morals? Because it's not a matter of faith and morals, is not the Pope necessarily binding him. It's actually the deposit of faith in Jesus and the apostles and the Holy Spirit who have bound you. And it's just the Pope who's clarifying it. But they didn't do that with all matters of discipline, did they? Nope. The apostles didn't reveal to us all matters of discipline. They're not part of the deposit of faith. I'm not saying they didn't have any discipline. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying, the issue of the Roman Missal as a matter of discipline, liturgical discipline, was not revealed by the apostles. So a pope cannot bind another pope on this matter. So that's kind of my preliminary remarks, is that we should recognize that this is disciplinary in its liturgical aspect. The language that he uses there, that is language that it does sound definitive to us today, but that was very boilerplate back then, very standard. And we have seen that language used in context where it was clear that even the Pope himself, who used that language, didn't believe that it was definitive, as far as faith and morals, and didn't believe that future popes couldn't reverse it, because they themselves may have altered or reversed it. So we know that, okay, that particular term there, that doesn't necessarily mean, although today it might mean that it's definitive on matters of faith morals. Back then that was used, that term could be used for matters of discipline. And I'm talking specifically about concepts or terminology like we decree, we define. When Trent uses something like that, even Trent, believe it or not, actually has some cases where it's clear that they were defining a matter of discipline, actually, and so it wasn't necessarily definitive. But in many cases, when Trent uses that whenever it comes to faith and morals, it is definitive. So that kind of language, though, when we hear it, we think, oh wow, that's ex cathedra. And that's the way we think today, but that wasn't necessarily the way that was intended back then. So all this language that you encounter in Quo Primum that seems to be definitive, that no other pope could alter, that wasn't the case. How do we know that? Because the same pope who issued it made alterations to it, made alterations to the Roman Missal. The same pope. And not only that, other popes afterwards made changes to the Roman Missal. And not only that, the breviary. There is actual language used concerning the breviary that is just like what you see there in Quo Primum, and yet that was altered in preconciliar times before Paul VI, and nobody said anything about it. That's why people, even like, you come across guys like Father Cicada, who I believe passed away recently, but Father Cicada, who was a set of contests, even people like him, kind of way out there on the fringe of sedevacantism, recognized that, okay, look, Quo Primum could be revised. He flat out admits that. Now, he doesn't believe Paul VI was a legitimate pope, so he doesn't believe it was, but he'll straight up tell you, yeah, it could be, because that language that's used there in Quo Primum, everybody knows this wasn't, definitive. It basically just meant everybody below a pope cannot reform this. It doesn't mean that a pope himself, however, can't reform this. What Pius V is getting at is nobody below a pope can reform or alter this missal. That's the key. You can read James Lacutus, who talks about this a little bit in his book, The Pope, the Council, and the Mass. He quotes Father Jungmann, who himself notes, Clement VIII, Urban VIII, Pius X, Clement XIII, Leo XIII, all made liturgical changes to the Roman Missal. Now, how could they do that if they believed Quo Primum could not be altered? It's noted that Pius X changed the breviary, made some changes there in Divino Afflatu. And again, the same language that's used of Quo Primum was used about the breviary in previous times by Pope. How could Pius X do that? Because, again, nobody believed that matters of discipline could be binding on future popes. Paul VI, who reformed the Missal, what was it, Missale Romanum, 1969, I believe. Paul VI quotes from Quo Primum while he's reforming the Missal. He's aware. Paul VI, who gave us the new missal, is aware of Quo Primum. He quotes from it in the opening line and then quotes from it later on. He's aware of what Quo Primum says, and he doesn't see it as a threat to what he's doing, and he shouldn't, because nobody had a problem with that. It's just amateurs who come across this stuff. They see it and they think, oh, wow. So much for this being a defeater to Catholicism. It's very sad that some people will just see that and they'll think, oh wow, Catholicism is destroyed by this, without really looking into it. I remember Whelton, what's his name? Whelton, Michael Whelton, wrote that book, The Two Paths. He's an Orthodox guy. He was previously Catholic, then he went Orthodox, and he gave a book for why he went Orthodox. And by the way, somebody's saying in the chat, liturgy is not the plaything of a pope. Obviously, nobody's ever claimed that. Who claimed that? But if Paul VI, well, if Pius V could alter some things to the Missal, why can't Paul VI? You might say that I don't agree with those alterations, but nobody's claiming it's a plaything. That's a straw man. Yeah, somebody's saying in the chat, Michael Whelton. That's right. There you go. I appreciate that. Michael Whelton wrote this book, and he mentions in there John the 22nd. I forget what the document is. I can't believe I'm drawing a blank on it, but it's where the Pope basically says something along the lines of, it's satanic to think that one Pope could bind another Pope on a matter of faith and morals. And you might think, oh, wow, that completely goes against papal infallibility. That's what you would get on the surface level. And clearly Michael Whelton used it in that way, right? Without really looking into it. And I remember reading that and thinking, I'm quite certain that Catholics were aware of this before Vatican I and its definition. So I wonder if they had answers to this. And of course there are. Yeah. Quia Corundum, right? John the 22nd. Appreciate that. I think it's Alexandre. Appreciate the title there. Yeah, he says it kind of at the beginning, but you really have to, number one, know the history behind it, which there's a lot involved, and then number two, you have to pay attention to the fact that where he's talking about the keys, he's talking about something specific there. He's not talking about, a pope can't bind another pope on a matter of faith and morals. He's talking something very, very specific involving the keys there. So it's not at all a defeater to papal infallibility. In fact, the same pope affirmed later on papal infallibility. So I mean, it was clear that he did not. That's not what he was intending when he was writing that. But when the average person just were to read that, they would think, "Oh wow, Catholicism's done. It's over. Game over. It's been defeated. Vatican I defeated, destroyed." Put it in all caps in the YouTube title. Vatican I destroyed, exposed. You get those guys. I want to challenge us to do better, especially Catholics, my fellow Catholics who are listening. Let's do better. Let's do better. Let's look further into issues. I'm not saying I know everything. Absolutely not. What I'm careful to do is, if I encounter something that seems to be a contradiction, I try to look further into it and I try to ask probing questions. How is this to be understood in a way that could be reconciled? And if there's no reasonable way to reconcile it, sure, that's fine. But if there are answers out there, I want to know them. I definitely want to know them. And I challenge y'all, anybody who's listening to this who maybe has that tendency to just see something like that and think, "Oh wow, Catholicism destroyed." Challenge you to do better. Because I think it's very, very irresponsible, especially the individual and others who are commenting in the post. I think it was very irresponsible of them, because it was so clear, painfully clear, they've never even read Quo Primum in its entirety, let alone the history behind it. They probably read a couple excerpts of Quo Primum or something, but they have not read the whole thing or are aware of its historical context or are aware of how that language was used in time in the past. So anyways, there's my quick show on Quo Primum. If y'all have any questions, put them in the chat. Make sure to put it to @Reason and Theology, and that way I can pick them out from comments, and I'll answer a couple, and then I gotta go get ready for this other roundtable that we're having at 6:00 in 20 minutes with Dr. Gavin Ortlund, who's going to be back on talking about the Assumption of the Virgin Mary. I'm trying to see if there's anything in the chat already. Let's see. Not seeing it. Not seeing anything. Is Humane Vitae irreformable? Now there's a good question. The encyclical in and of itself, or the propositions in it? And the reason why I ask that is let me rephrase it. Is Humane Vitae just considered in and of itself definitive? Like the actual thing, the actual document? No, right? I mean, it wasn't declared ex cathedra or anything like that. But the propositions that it's affirming in Humane Vitae, are they definitive by some other means? And I think a really good case can be demonstrated that they are definitive by the ordinary and universal magisterium, not because of Humane Vitae itself, but because this has been the consistent teaching of the bishops throughout the ages to be held definitively. I think one can make a strong case for that. I've seen some good objections to that too, and I still have not really explored that in depth. I intend to. So I mean, I have a provisional view here that I lean to it being definitive by virtue of the ordinary and universal magisterium. But I understand there are some really good counter arguments to that, and I'm willing to hear them. But I think the weight, the burden of proof is going to be on those who would say it's not definitive. I don't think the burden of proof is on me. I think the burden of proof is going to be on those who would say it's not definitive. I'm willing to hear it. I'm willing to consider it. I don't see it just yet. And I don't know if I ever will, but I'm willing to hear more. But in and of itself, by virtue of humane vitae, no, but by virtue of the ordinary and universal magisterium, which humane vitae is simply expressing, it sure seems to be that way. Sure seems to be definitive. I know you have your work cut out for you if you're going to argue otherwise. Can any Latin bishop reform the missal now? No. In fact, Paul VI used some pretty strong language in his apostolic constitution, but no bishop has that authority to alter the Roman missal. Now there are not alterations, but there are variations and stuff like that in the Roman missal that you're free to choose, even as a priest. But no, you can't just like go and change the canon or something like that. That would be illicit. Okay, so Michael, sure, Quo Primum is not per se irreformable, but why was it kept by all popes up until Paul VI? Again, there were reforms prior to Paul VI. There were reforms, but I guess the substance of what you're asking me is that Paul VI, in your estimation, ushered in a just completely different Roman missal compared to those reforms in the preconciliar era. Now, I could see you maybe arguing that. I could see that. And you might ask, well, why didn't they change it as radically as Paul VI? And there's a lot of answers. Should Paul VI have modified it the way that he did, as radically as he did? I don't think so. Did he have the authority to? Yes. Is it evil that he did so? No. Was it the best reforms that could have been made? No. We're talking about the difference between good and best. I don't think that every reform that he made was best. And maybe because some of the preconciliar popes recognize that they didn't make those, but at the same time, you can make a pretty strong case that there were some things that needed to be reformed in the preconciliar liturgy. I don't have a problem with that. It's just the end result of what we got is the problem that I have, not the theory of reforming it. I don't really have that much of a problem with that. You need to ask yourself this question. If you're so concerned about the Tridentine Mass being reformed by Paul VI, why do you, presumably, maintain the Tridentine Mass that has all kinds of reforms and innovations in it? The low Mass. Now, believe me, I know there's a fundamental difference between a low Mass and a high Mass, but the low Mass is entirely innovative. Communion on the tongue was an innovation. Unleavened bread was, you might call it an innovation. You might call it going back to how it was during the Passover, but it was definitely an innovation for the vast majority of the way the Eucharist was celebrated in the first millennium. Separating chrismation from baptism, innovation. Withholding communion from infants, innovation. Withholding the chalice from the laity, innovation. Now, I know not all of these things happen with the Tridentine Mass itself, right? I mean, some of those innovations occurred before Paul V. I understand that. But what I'm saying is they're enshrined in the Tridentine Mass. They are indicative of the Tridentine Mass. those are innovations. Those are reforms. You might argue they're good reforms. That's fine. But guess what? Now you're having to explain why you are an innovator and why you affirm liturgical reforms. And now you're in the same position as I am, right? If I have to explain Pope Paul VI missal and reforms and stuff there, don't think that you're exempt. You got to do the same to everybody who's going to ask you, what about these changes? What about those innovations and reforms to the liturgy that I just mentioned? And there are many, 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 many others. Those are just the big ones that I like to mention. So I want you to ask those questions. Don't just stop with the Latin Mass. Go back further. Go back further than the Tridentine Mass. Yeah. Is there an article debunking the claims anti-Catholics have about Quia Quorundum? I'm sorry, I thought you were going to ask about Quo Primum. Yeah. I read one a while back when I was researching. I forget his name. I'll have to go back and find it and post it in here. I think that would be very, very helpful. Whole books have been written on that issue. Brian Tierney, although he takes more of the position that is the one that is inconsistent with papal infallibility, and there are responses to Tierney, of course. All right, 10 minutes left. What's the history of the sedevacantist proof of Quo Primum? I mean, again, not all sedevacantists affirm that, but look, I mean, sedevacantism came around in the 70s, if I recall correctly, so it wouldn't be older than that, and I'm sure they're just simply reacting to the abuses they see in the Novus Ordo. So, of course, they're going to find some kind of reason to reject the Novus Ordo as far as its validity, and so Quo Primum gives them that easy argument. But I don't like easy arguments whenever they're not true, right? Not all things can be refuted that easily. So I haven't found it very impressive. So what liturgical rite do I attend? Well, unfortunately, we don't have any Tridentine masses or Eastern Catholic masses, divine liturgies nearby. So I attend a Novus Ordo. Yeah. Fun stuff, right? The priest is good. The priest is solid. And he's pretty good when it comes to high liturgy as far as Novus Ordo goes. So I think it's I could deal with his mass. Let's see. What else we have here? Yeah. Yeah, this is a great question from Lewis, of course, from LG25, right? One of the main texts concerning the magisterium. So he asks, how do you make sense of Lumen Gentium 25 statement that we should ascend to the Pope even when he's not speaking ex cathedra? Yeah, excellent question. And this is where I've noticed some people go astray because they don't make distinctions. Not saying Lewis is one of them. No, Lewis is definitely not one of them. Lewis is extremely intelligent, but I have noticed people grab Lumen Gentium 25. Again, not him, others, who latch onto it thinking that means everything that the Pope says is definitive. Not only definitive, but infallible. Yeah, it's talking about an assent of submission of intellect and will, right? Religious submission of intellect and will, that level of assent, which is not irreformable. That's all it's talking about. So, of course, there's different levels of assent depending on the level of authority by which is used whenever something is proposed by the magisterium. So if something is taught ex cathedra, it's to be held definitively, right? So although there's some other language that's sometimes used there, believe me, I'm aware of that, but it's definitive, right? It's not an assent that's ever going to change or something. Whereas there are non-definitive propositions by the Pope that you are to give a submission of intellect and will level assent to, but that's not necessarily irreformable, right? So that's kind of what's going on there in LG 25. What else we have? I'm looking here. Novus Ordo is valid, just illicit. Think about that for a moment. I'm assuming you're a Catholic. Your name is RC. I'm assuming that's Roman Catholic, right? I don't know if you're Catholic, but I'm assuming you are. Think about that for a moment. You affirm the divine institution of an office that can give you an illicit liturgy for this long? Does that make sense? Why are you still Catholic? Why haven't you gone Orthodox? I mean, carry it to its logical conclusion. You're affirming this is a divine institution upon which the gates of hell will not prevail. And that includes doctrine and also its holiness, which pertains to liturgy. And you're saying it's illicit? So the church can be bound for this many years to something illicit. I would say your church is defective and you're not in the right church if that's true. So no, I don't agree that it's illicit. A better criticism of the Novus Ordo would be that it is not the best reforms that could have been made. And it's definitely not well done in the average parish, right? But if we're just going to talk about the missal itself objectively, not how it's abused day to day, even the missal itself is not the best that it could be. I think you have grounds to argue that. All right. Last one, classical theist. What do you think essentially constitutes a magisterial act? Yeah, I've heard some argue that the Pope's interviews might even qualify. No. Although I'll be careful in phrasing it. Let me be careful in the way I say it. If he is teaching right, teaching on faith and morals as the Pope, not as a private theologian, then it is magisterial no matter what document he uses or form of media. I mean, no matter what the medium, whether it's a homily or an encyclical or a papal bull, it is magisterial. Could he do that in an interview? That's a good question. I think he could. Has a pope ever? I don't argue that position that a pope has ever, but what if a pope came out and made it clear during an interview, I'm teaching as a pope, and he teaches on a matter of faith and morals, and he does just that, he teaches. Are we really going to say that, it's up for grabs, and if he teaches something that is false, this is no blemish on the Roman See? I mean, are we really going to argue that? No, of course not. We're not going to say, well, technically it's not an encyclical. Technically it's not a, no. But in most cases, when he's giving an interview, is he intending to do that? Is he intending to teach as the Pope on a matter of faith and morals? No, I don't think so. Unless that has been made known somehow, I would assume no. So I would say ordinarily, no, papal interviews are not magisterial, but he could use whatever he wants technically to teach, right? There's nothing that Jesus said that the successor of Peter has to use an encyclical. He has to use this or it has to use that. That was never established. So Pope could alter some of those parameters, but only so far. This is a very, very good question. Okay. So, yeah. Absurd, illicit, liturgy, indefectibility. Right. Yeah. I think you have a defective church if you really believe that it's either invalid or illicit. Why are you still in the Catholic Church is my question. But anyways, all right. Well, thank y'all for your questions. Good stuff. Got a show coming up in 2 minutes. Y'all, just a few. Till next time. God bless.
Hey, thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button and the subscribe button.